Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to the 2021 Student Assembly Presidential and Vice Presidential Debate. My name is Riley Olinger. I'm Executive Editor of the Dartmouth, and I'll be moderator for the day. Under normal circumstances, this event would be taking place in person at Dartmouth Hall. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, this year's debate will be held over Zoom. However, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing all of us on campus together soon. The candidates for Student Assembly President are Atia Khan and Jennifer Chen. The candidates for Vice President are Sebastian Munoz McDonald, who is running with Khan, and Maggie Johnston, who is running with Chen. Voting will open tomorrow, Monday, April 9th at 5 p.m. Eastern, and end on April 20th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Candidates have been informed of the structure of the debate and have agreed to the time limits and rules. Candidates will have up to 2 minutes to answer questions and have the option to respond to each other during the campaign-specific questions section. Also present today are the multimedia editor for the Dartmouth, as well as the chair of EPAC, who is monitoring the debate. We'll open with 1-minute introductions from the candidates, move into general questions about student assembly, campaign-specific questions, and end with questions from the audience submitted through a Google form that was posted on our social media pages. I'll be giving hand signals to the candidates to let them know when their time is up, 1 finger for 30 seconds left, and this sign for 10 seconds left. Let's go ahead and get started with introductions. Jennifer, let's begin with you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for giving us the chance to have this debate. I'm Jennifer Chen. I'm a 22. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I've been on Student Assembly for 3 years, and during my time as a Dartmouth student and on Student Assembly, I've noticed a lot of space for improvement in the community. I care a lot about making Dartmouth a more inclusive space that provides adequate resources for all students across communities, especially during this time of reopening. And I'm most passionate about the student aid and mental health portions of our platform. I'm excited to share a little bit more about our platform in this debate. But in terms of financial aid and mental health specifically, I've worked a lot on the initiatives and committees on Student Assembly, and I'm really proud of the progress that we've achieved. But I also know that it's not enough. So Maggie and I really look forward to listening, understanding, and taking action, stepping up and doing more. So we're excited to work with the college towards realistic and gradual change. But that's me, and thank you so much.
All right, Maggie, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie Johnston. I'm a 22 from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to sort of talk to everyone. I'm so happy to be running with Jennifer for your VP position. Like Jennifer, I've been on Student Assembly for the past 3 years. I originally ran for Student Assembly because I really felt like Dartmouth needed to do sort of more to represent student voices overall, and that they weren't doing enough, and that a lot of communities were being underrepresented. Throughout my time on Student Assembly, I'm actually incredibly proud of some of the progress we've made. I was one of the founding members of the Dartmouth Coach Voucher Initiative, and have really been so proud to see that sort of through to fruition, and hope to finalize that next year. I also came up with the idea for the Menstrual Product Project, which is about to sort of go live. You're going to start to see menstrual products in all women and gender neutral bathrooms across campus. So again, just really proud of what we've been able to achieve, but do know that it's not enough. And like many of you, share all the frustrations with the administration, with Dartmouth, with the experiences that we've all had the past year, and sincerely believe that Jennifer and I have the best platform to sort of make next year better and to sort of represent all the students. So I'm really excited to be working with you going forward.
Thank you, Maggie. All right, Atia.
Hi, my name is Atia Khan. I'm a 22. I'm originally from the Seattle, Washington area. On campus over the past 3 years, I've been lucky enough to be involved in a lot of different campus organizations. I'm currently serving on the Inter-Sorority Council as a programming and inclusivity chair. I've served in my sorority as a social chair over the past 2 years. I've been part of the Dartmouth Minority Pre-Law Association. I've been involved with FICEP and Questbridge groups on campus. I also work for the Tucker Center for Spiritual and Ethical Life. And I'm running for Student Assembly President alongside Sebastian, my lovely running mate. And we decided to run after the pandemic for us sort of signaled a crisis point, and a lot of different issues coming together and compounding upon one another. And we agree that there are some really substantial changes that need to take place. And additionally, we also believe that these changes need to be drastic. They need to be broad. They need to function to serve various groups of students. We've had the great fortune of speaking with the International Student Association, with Rotaract, with various other clubs who've told us sort of the vision that they need, what their needs are. And yeah, we just hope to help them see the changes that we need for higher quality of student life come to fruition.
Sebastian?
Thank you so much. I'm Sebastian Muniz McDonald. I go by he, him, his pronouns, and I'm so glad to be running alongside Atia for just running for Vice President of Student Assembly. On campus, I've been involved in Humanitarian Service Club, Dartmouth Rotaract. I'm involved in Dartmouth Model UN. I was a former member of the Dartmouth Class of 2023 Council, and I've also served as a global gender policy and advocacy fellow at Save the Children, where I worked on trying to end gender-based violence against girls. When we first began preparing to run for these positions, we had a distinct, comprehensive plan for a vision for policy that we would like to enact to support student athletes, students with disabilities, first-generation low-income students, support international students, and support students of color through material policy. And it's because we genuinely care. Of course, we'll consider what administration says and take it into account, but we'll work as much as possible to make student demands heard. However, when administration makes budget cuts or misallocations of funds that do not line up with student needs, we'll be clear about this and resolutely stand for what's best. We need advocates in office that push for administration to do better for students that have been left behind by the consequences of their decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you. All right, we're now going to move into the general questions section. So I'm going to state the question and then both campaigns will be given 2 minutes to respond. So, over the past few years, you've seen multiple student assembly presidents and vice presidents hold these positions. What has the current student assembly leadership done well, and what would you like to do differently? Atia, let's start with your campaign.
Yeah, I think even just recently, we saw that email that went out about how Student Assembly has managed to put together a liaison committee that will help oversee some of the things that are going on in the Board of Trustees. We think that's a really, really fantastic development. We're so proud and so happy to see that this has been able to come to fruition through the hard work of Student Assembly this past year. We think this is a really important step in the right direction. On that note, something that we think could potentially improve going forward, we think that we can push a little harder. We have precedent at Cornell University, for example, where they have 3 student representatives on their Board of Trustees and they all hold voting power. And we think this would be really, really powerful and would give a lot of power to students to be able to hold administration accountable when it comes to how finances are being spent, how they're being invested, et cetera, just various very complicated manners regarding the budget. So we think that moving towards greater student participation, ability to really sit at the table and be a part of these conversations is probably the next best step. And if I have any remaining time, I'll pass it over to Sebastian.
Is there a remaining time? Okay. Yeah, and so just to expand on Atia's point, I think we've seen really great steps in the past week from Student Assembly. I mean, they created an Instagram post that published some information and an infographic about the budget. And this was shortly following some push that our campaign made in order to increase budget transparency of Student Assembly. And we don't push for this just because we would like to, in any way that's damning. We push for this because we would like to see what is the best way we could spend money, how it's currently being spent, and the path forward. So we realistically would like to see kind of just, especially as outsiders to Student Assembly, we would like to see exactly how it functions. We would like for it to be transparent fully going forward. And we would just like for all this information to be easily accessible in the future, just published on the website, constantly available. And we'd also like to update our students in weekly chats, such as the ones on the Dartmouth College Radio. So I think just moving towards transparency is a great step.
Amazing. All right, Jennifer, your campaign?
Yeah, of course. So Maggie and I have both been able to work on Student Assembly over the past 3 years and really proud of a lot of the progress that we've made. So like specifically on financial aid, that's like one thing that's pretty important to me, like as a benefactor of financial aid myself. I know that there's a lot that Dartmouth does to help students, but often that's not enough. So like it's important to know that like Student Assembly is a COSO organization, and the budget is always transparent. Student can always easily access it or request information. And because like of our restrictions, we can't directly give money to students, but we've worked on this, specifically going through the coach vouchers, through the co-op vouchers, through like DDS Pantry and like the Menstrual Product Project. These are all like pilot programs that we're using to show the college that this is something that's needed, that we need to help students get more aid. And that's something that I'm really proud of, that we've been able to work on Student Assembly. Additionally, mental health is something else that's like really important to me, as I've like used a lot of the resources, whether that's like Dick's House or Student Wellness, and I'm sure we'll get to more about it later. But I'm really proud of the work that Student Assembly has done in terms of making like meditation apps and like just more resources accessible. And then just to like, I addressed the original point, I think the biggest strength for me and Maggie is our approach focuses on gradual but like realistic change. Going up to the school and just demanding that the board have 3 additional voting things. We've been trying to get people on the board for over 10 years. And it's kind of the virtue of the institution that's really rigid, that we need to be strategic about making change and being willing to work with administration instead of just making like demands and taking aggressive stances that are like telling the college, hey, you need to do this, because they don't need to work with us. But Student Assembly's strength comes from being able to pool collected voices, stand behind them, and being willing to work with a college and convince them that these are the issues that students face and that this is important.
All right, I'll hop in really quickly. I think that Kate has done an excellent job with sort of the dedication to the program. She's set up these incredible committees that actually meet super routinely and have been able to actually create an organizational structure in Student Assembly that I've never seen in my 3 years here. Like, the progress she's made on that front has been tremendous. The communication she's made with the administration and the actual real tangible progress with this liaison board, finalizing the pantry, all those things have been tremendous. But I think she could do a little bit better job communicating with the student body at large, which is what we're committed to doing by sending out these weekly newsletters. Because like Jennifer said, this budget has always been transparent, but we can see in this past week that many students didn't necessarily know that. So we do want to bridge that gap. And then like super last point, I'm sorry, so sorry. It's just that we want to make sure that we really reach out to organizations and actually ask where we can be helpful. I think Student Assembly has a history of sometimes inserting itself where it's not welcome or needed, or inserting itself in the wrong area. So I think that just we recognize that we don't have all the same experiences as everybody, and we want to make sure that we're reaching out and asking people where can we help, not just telling them that we're going to step in.
Thank you all. I'm going to move on to the next question. The past year has been incredibly taxing on student mental health. The effects of social distancing restrictions, virtual learning, and financial stressors have made this a difficult time for many in our community. On top of that, Dartmouth has tragically lost 3 students within the past 6 months. Given the severity of these circumstances, how do you plan to tackle the student mental health crisis that has been exacerbated by the pandemic? What initiatives do you have planned, and how feasible do you think they are? Jennifer, let's start with your campaign.
Yeah, I can take that one really quick. So I'm really passionate about the mental health access at Dartmouth, and I'm really familiar with the resources and lack thereof at Dartmouth. I frequently go to Dick's House, I go to the Student Wellness Centers for check-ins, use the Unmask app, and I understand that the issues that Dartmouth students face in finding help, and especially with like the chaos of like the world at large, and also specifically like the loss in the Dartmouth community, like there are a lot of really serious issues. Like, we understand that mental health is really different for students at different places, but we want to be able that we have to like provide resources for everyone. In terms of the actual action plans, since I go to Dick's House like this past year, my counselor said that she couldn't talk to me because she didn't have a license to practice out of state for telehealth. So we want to be able to focus on what we can do right now with Dick's House. So whether that's like getting more access to telehealth, figuring out the sign up process better, so people aren't on hold for forever. We know that Dick's House doesn't have resources for long-term support. So while we push for that, we're going to do other things, such as making sure insurance covers the referrals, that we can help aid transportation to referral appointments, and that we can lean into telehealth options so students can access care wherever they are, whenever. So as more progress is made, we can push for more funding at Dick's House, hiring more counselors, specifically those of people of color, and really just get resources for people to talk to wherever they are, and no matter like what they're going through. In addition to that, Maggie and I are pretty excited about like student wellness initiatives too, just like little things to help decrease the stressors of daily Dartmouth life.
Yeah, I think Jennifer really covered that super well. I think we're both intimately aware of the mental health resources. We've both utilized them in the past and are aware that they often fall short. We really respect, I think, your guys' efforts to increase funding to Dick's House like monumentally and to really create that overhaul. But like students need access to mental health now, and we know that that's not feasible in the moment. So I think that our proposals of transportation is just very feasible at the moment. Dartmouth Insurance covering referrals, very feasible at the moment. Telehealth, we're we're looking to create change that we can implement immediately so that students get the desperately needed help.
Yeah, and that's not to say like we're not pushing for the long-term stuff. It's just that like what action can we take now while we're working on pushing for long-term stuff instead of just coming in saying we need this now. Yeah.
Thank you both. All right, Kana Munoz, your campaign.
Yeah, thank you so much. The inaction that administration has taken historically on mental health is one of the driving factors of why we decided to run. We've seen inaction at Yale where a student took her own life. We've seen inaction at Dartmouth when students have taken their own life, and there has not yet been significant investment in significant hiring of new counselors, hiring of psychologists, and hiring of psychiatrists. We have waits of possibly weeks to months for single visits at sometimes at Dick's house. We have students that are waiting in life and death situations and yet are not given the care that they deserve. We believe it's Dartmouth's responsibility to help its students who are struggling as much as possible, and holding them accountable to this is not radical in any way. To us, this means increased investment by administration into hiring a mental health hotline that actually runs 24/7 and does not require hour waits, and online scheduling appointments for psychiatry or psychologist appointments rather than having the current call that it is. We believe that accessibility and mental health are very intimately tied, and that we should always push for both in any efforts that we make.
Yeah, and to go off of that also, a big part of our policy has been the fact that the leave of absence policies is something that needs like incredible restructuring and reexamination. The existence of the leave of absence policy, which here and at other schools, for example, can require students to have to seek readmittance and then be approved to come back on campus. This alone can be a huge disincentivizer for people to actually seek help. I think having more help is absolutely important. And in terms of feasibility, I think we simply just cannot wait. I think this is, as we've seen, it is a life and death situation, and we can't wait any longer for Dartmouth to decide that it isn't and that it's profitable. But additionally, we also have to make it so that seeking help is not something that is stigmatized, not something that is traumatizing. Seeking help that make sure that students are not treated as liabilities, but rather are treated as people who are suffering and really, really need help with the resources that we have. And we would also be very interested in working with the Committee on Standards to ensure that students have more understanding and flexibility during this incredibly difficult time. We don't want people to be afraid to seek help, and we don't want them to feel like seeking help will mean that they will get kicked off campus and potentially not be allowed to return.
Thank you all so much.
Would it be possible to do a quick like addressing of that or a response, I guess?
No
worries about that, sorry.
I think it might cause the debate to go longer than expected. So I think for now I'm going to say no, and I'm sorry about that. If we have more time at the end of the debate, you're welcome to include it in your final addresses. But for now, let's go on to the next question. So the college has announced that they plan to have as normal a fall term as possible. What are your priorities in facilitating this return? And let's start with the Con Munoz campaign.
Yeah, so we think there are a couple of central concerns that are important to when we return in the fall. One point of our campaign that we think is incredibly important, and as somebody on the ISC and somebody who's been a part of Greek life during my time here, I think facilitating a safe return for people to these social spaces in the fall is incredibly important to us. We're very cognizant of the fact that sexual violence and other types of violence are things that can commonly occur in Greek spaces, even during the best of times. We recognize that COVID has socially isolated a lot of people, and people will be rushing to get back into these spaces most likely when they can. And while that's understandable, we want to make sure that we can start dialogue and have a constant line of communication with groups like the ISC, the IFC, the NHPC, the GLC, et cetera, to ask them how we can help facilitate this return in as safe a manner as possible, so that we can start having these conversations to see what changes need to be implemented within houses. And I will allot the rest of my time to Sebastian.
Thank you so much. And I think a large part of what we think about when we think about reopening colleges, think about all those students that possibly could be left behind in this decision. We first think about international students who may have to return from abroad with very complicated visa restrictions. And we think about kind of how we can support them best. And so we've spoken to the International Students Association about how much visa support is currently provided by the office of provided by the OVIS office. And just kind of checking in on every single group to decide whether their capacity needs to expand, whether the capacity is fine as it is, and basically just essentially kind of gauging. Our plan is to kind of work with many groups on campus, make sure that we're gauging all current needs, and make sure that the return to campus is completely responsible. And responsible means just kind of taking accountability to different student groups and knowing that that their specific circumstances may differ than from others. And so, yeah, we're just really committed to working across and starting dialogue to create action.
Thank you so much. Jenna Johnson, your campaign.
Yeah, I can sort of start off on this one. I think that returning to normal is just an absolutely top priority for Jennifer and I. I think this past year has been so frustrating and so debilitating for many students. I think this sort of social isolation has been an absolutely driving factor into the mental health crisis that we're seeing in the school and across the country. And I think for both of us, it's an absolute priority that we commit to bringing people back as much as possible. I mean, obviously within responsibility with CDC guidelines, but if things continue down the same trajectory that we are going on, we have a couple platform points that we really want to highlight. So the first is just really open communication about fall term and fall reopening and who's going to be allowed to be on campus. Dartmouth has previously said that they might not be able to return to 100% capacity. We think that part of this might come from the housing shortage that they've created, and we fully intend to hold them accountable for that and to ensure that every student that wants to be back on in fall term, assuming the CDC guidelines permit, that they're able to be back. There's no reason why a Dartmouth housing crisis is a student problem, and we should be all able to return. The second thing for us is the 24s. We recognize just how much missed experiences that they've had, and we recognize that they don't necessarily feel always as integrated into the community as we would like. We'd like to set up a mentorship program for the 24s where we match them with an upperclassman to sort of introduce them to things like the D plan, or like just generally social spaces, or just how to sort of be a part of the Dartmouth community. Not to say that they aren't, because they absolutely are, but just to help them really feel like wanted and welcome, because I don't know that they've all felt that way this year. And then like your campaign said, social spaces, we just want to make sure that they open and that the Dartmouth doesn't take this as an opportunity to unnecessarily restrict Greek houses or to cut back on programs like that. So Jennifer, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, of course. So we're really looking to just like work with various organizations across campus, whether they're Greek organizations, gender inclusive Greek organizations, or just like various social spaces on campus to make sure that we can make up for a lot of the missed experiences over the past year. So kind of like the other campaign, we're really looking forward to working with a variety of organizations as well as the college to make sure that people can get back and find their community at Dartmouth and make up for all of the missed experiences. In addition, we really want to push the college to like bring back a lot of the things that are pretty key to Dartmouth experience. There's like the bonfire, maybe allowing like 24s to walk, or subsidizing hotels for 21s to come back for homecoming. These are all really big things that we're really excited about and want to focus on pushing. In terms of,
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. I'm going to start enforcing the time limits a little bit more so that we can make sure we get through everything. But I'm going to put it over now to Athea and Sebastian.
Yeah, I think I can definitely continue our answer. So I think another thing that we're worried about.
Wait, I think they answered first. They answered.
Yeah, we answered this question.
Yeah, you did.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Moving on.
No problem.
On the topic of both your campaigns, you seem to agree on the need to support student athletes. What do you intend to do to support this group of students specifically? And so this is going to go to Jennifer and Maggie.
Okay, I can start. So yeah, Maggie and I are very passionate about supporting student athletes and in doing so, and beyond just saying like we support them, we stand with them. We've been consistent in like our support. We've talked to student athlete friends, we've reached out to the Student Athlete Advisory Coalition, really learning about what issues are top of mind for them. So we're really excited about pushing the administration to have student athletes get an additional year of eligibility to make up for like their missed season, and also really pushing to make sure that the college is held accountable for the various reviews that were stipulated in the reinstatement. So whether that's the gender equity review, kind of like making sure that they have their plan published on the site by March 15th, 2022, or the other NCAA compliance reviews or the PWC reviews. Like we really want to make sure that we can support student athletes And I know, Maggie, you can also add to this a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think student athletes just generally deserve so much credit for all the incredible work that they're doing. And I think the ability to balance the sport and like school life is something that I admire greatly. And on top of that, they have so many great initiatives going on. I know that the student athletes had like an 100% voting turnout for the fall, or that they pushed pretty heavily for that. So I think that not only will we work to directly support student athletes and initiatives like the additional like year of eligibility, like Jennifer said, but we'll also work with student athletes to sort of better our entire community. I know that they're potentially going to do a crisis management training for sort of suicide prevention crisis management that they're going to push for all athletes. And I think we'd be super interested in working with them to try and expand that to the entire school. Just generally things like that, to partner with athletes and to sort of reach out to them and make sure that we're on the same page.
Thank you both. All right, Conan Munoz.
Yeah, so I think first of all, we have to recognize that student athletes is not a monolith. Student athletes are many people, different people on campus that occupy different spaces as well as being athletes. Many of them are deeply invested in academics. Many of them are also hold other identities, such as being students of color. There are many and there are many women who are really prominent student athletes, as we've seen by recent initiatives like the Organization to Support Women in Sports and also the Black Student Athlete Alliance. And so I think me and Atia are really committed to working in the intersection between student athletes and other student groups to figure out a way to push for joint progress, to figure out a way to push against budget cuts and make budget cuts more difficult in general. Because I think the core of this issue, especially with the cuts to Dartmouth swim and dive, the cuts to lightweight rowing, and the cuts to golf, is the fact that Dartmouth is very willing to cut what it deems unnecessary. And when it deems your sport unnecessary, then your varsity sport can be the next to go. So I think we have to create a resolute opposition to budget cuts. And I think that definitely intersects with all of our other issues as well. And so we just recognize that student athletes are people that we need to push for, people that have been left behind many times. And I just think that we recognize that I think pushing together with many different groups together can accomplish the goal of forcing the administration to be accountable to students and not pushing these budget cuts in times that we have a lot of wealth that's being generated at Dartmouth.
I think to add on to that also, we really do resonate with what Jennifer and Maggie said about there needs to be accountability for what's already been done, for the damage that's already been done. In addition to that, however, I think there's also a level of, again, coming back to this issue of transparency. A big issue is that when these cuts were made, there was basically no communication that was made directly with these teams prior to this decision being made. This is a very, very big and very major decision, and it affected the lives of these students in a huge way. And at the very least, if the budget cuts really were necessary, they deserve to hear why. They deserve to look at the numbers. They deserved to have a conversation with people in administration. And so establishing lines of clear communication is definitely going to be another priority of ours, to ensure that students are a part of this conversation. They should not be left out of really big decisions like this.
Thank you all for your responses. All right. Both of your campaigns have discussed initiatives to support students of color and foster a more inclusive environment on campus. Why is your campaign best suited to address these needs? Conan Munoz.
So I think to start is that I think what Sebastian and I lack in student assembly experience, we make up for in our other various organizations and groups across campus. I personally have been in several groups that are for POC or for minorities or for low-income people or et cetera, other groups that one could consider marginalized on this campus. And so I think that we have the combination of a very personal investment, being a part of these groups ourselves and seeing and unknowing how our lives have been made difficult by some of these policies that we're pushing back against, how we've suffered. In addition to, I think, being so involved in these groups, we have had so much exposure to so many other people who have also shared these issues and have communicated these issues with us over the course of years. We've had several conversations and we've spoken to several groups, and we think that we have sort of a concrete idea of what needs are, and the needs are urgent and they're immediate, and they are large in scale, but that's just the reality of what students are needing. And I can let Sebastian take the rest of this question.
Yeah, I think we just have to acknowledge that there's definitely room for improvement in terms of just trying to foster a better campus culture in many ways. And so we would love to work with the Latinx and Caribbean Council towards creating a better environment and a better community for Latinx and Caribbean students. We would love to work with the NAACP in trying to create solidarity across communities of color. And we would just love to kind of always take student feedback into account when it comes to creating a better community for students of color. And I think in our own personal experiences, we've seen the need for desperate need for building up community, creating this kind of bond between communities that actually kind of creates change in and of itself. When all of us feel scattered across campus, we can't make the same change we can as when we feel united. So I think that's our path forward.
Thank you both so much. Jen and Johnson, your campaign?
Yeah, so I'm very passionate about like helping POC on campus, like being a second generation like Chinese American woman, like growing up kind of under the model minority myth, predominantly in like wealthy and white spaces. I've thought a lot about identity. So with like the recent rise of anti-Asian hate and also like consistent precedent for like institutional aggression against BIPOC communities, especially in like the past year. Like I understand that Dartmouth is kind of a bubble, but these macro problems really influence people deeply in our Dartmouth community. So our ticket really wants to ensure that intolerance and aggression, no matter how micro, and institutional racism have no place at Dartmouth. In terms of what we will actually do, we will increase awareness of the racism and bias reporting by OPAL, making the process really transparent so people know what resources they have. We're going to try to increase campus dialogue on these issues, really recognize clubs that celebrate diverse cultural experiences and provide support and advocacy in helping people kind of find these spaces. We understand that like the Black experience is something that understanding that is something that everyone can benefit from. And we've like reached out to the Schoolhouse Anti-Racism Coalition to talk about how we can make a program to launch in the fall and how we can help them with kind of like increasing more conversations and making sure that there's an actively anti-racist like conversation on campus. So we think that like one thing that we really want to work on is similar to the campaign. We want to partner with OPAL with various clubs from different parts of the community to really create actual change through highlighting speakers, running joint events, and collaborating together. We want to make sure POC feel comfortable existing in clubs that they're in and also clubs that are not racially defined. And there's so much more space for us to work together. And finally, I just want to say that we know that inclusivity is intersectional. So no matter like gender, race, class, or sexual orientation, we need to work together across these communities towards inclusivity. Maggie, I don't know yeah.
I think I'm out of time, but I think just generally, I really appreciate that answer. And I think you really did cover what we were trying to get across. I do think more than anything, our campaign is built on listening. We recognize where we don't know and we are willing to reach out. We're willing to listen. We're willing to take feedback. I can't pretend to understand the experience of all minorities on campus, and I would be wrong to suggest that I did. So I think more than anything, we want to listen and we want to work with organizations that do understand better than we do so that we can ask, where can we be helpful, and just really, really listen.
Thank you all. We're now going to move into the campaign specific questions. So these are going to be directed into one campaign in particular, and the other campaign will have an opportunity to respond. So the first question is directed to the Con Munoz campaign. A great deal of work done by Student Assembly leadership involves working side by side with the Dartmouth administration. However, your campaign has, at times, taken a fairly antagonistic stance towards administration, especially in regards to your social media presence. What do you hope your working relationship with the administration will look like? And do you worry that this approach that you have taken to campaigning will have negative consequences for you going forward?
Yeah, we can talk about this. So I think the reason that we've taken sort of a harsh stance is because we feel that there has been too much, there's been a lot of compromise, and students have been forced over and over again to compromise, to play nice, to sit and say, you know, we'll get to it in 5 years, we'll get to it in 10 years, we'll get to it in 15 years. And, you know, I think this strategy, it has worked marginally. There has been some really great progress that's been made in the short run. There has been really notable achievements that have happened, but ultimately, I think that we need people in office who are willing to take a stern and resolute stance with administration. And I think it should be clear that our job, while it is also to work with administration, and we do plan, if we get into office, to work with them, to have open lines of communication, to communicate often. We do also know that our primary job would be to represent students, and that students feel frustrated, students feel that they have been abandoned, students feel that they are not being listened to. And we acknowledge that, and we respect that and understand their frustration, and think that there's more that can be done in this regard. And there have been some really severe lapses, whether it's been, like large sexual assault lawsuits, whether it's been other lawsuits. And, I don't know how long we'll be able to demand change in these regards if we are asking extremely nicely and compromising every single demand that students have. And I'll let Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you so much. We just believe that the pathway to change is not through litigation. And in this past year, it shows that that's what administration only listens to. So we just believe that there needs to be a change of strategy. In this past year, we've seen major cuts to Kresge Library. We've seen major cuts. We saw the permanent shutdown of the Kresge Library, of the Paddocks Music Library, and we saw multiple budget cuts across the board. We just believe that in many cases, the only change that did happen, like the Title IX lawsuit against the cuts to varsity sports, were done through litigation, as well as the changes to accessibility on campus, like the lawsuit that was filed against Dartmouth for violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we just believe that there's a better path forward and that we should represent students and make that the way.
Thank you both. Jennifer or Maggie, would you like to respond at all? You would have 1 minute.
Yes, thank you. I think it's important to sort of acknowledge the power of student assembly. And I think Jennifer and I are very aware of how student assembly operates because we have served on it for 3 years. And I think that experience has really positioned us better to have a stronger relationship with the administration, because we know fundamentally student assembly generates all of its power through relationships. And that can be incredibly frustrating, because you better believe, like, Jennifer and I want to go in like gunslinging as well, right? Like, we're equally frustrated. We're so upset by some of the decisions that Dartmouth has made, and we desperately want change, but we also know that has not achieved results in the past. We saw 9 administrations fail to get any progress on the Board of Trustees. And then we saw Kate and Jonathan take an entirely different approach and talk to the administration and say, listen, like, we need some compromise here. Like, we need to understand where you're coming from. Like, please explain to us why you're against this. And they were actually able to make change. And I get how that can be really frustrating sometimes, and it feels like they're not doing everything that they can. But I think that student assembly generates all of its power through relationships, and sometimes you have to be willing to sort of work with administration even when you disagree. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
Just to quickly add, we share the frustrations, and we are going to take a firm stance to advocate on behalf of students. Change is really institutional at Dartmouth, and it's going to be very slow. So going in for something like demanding reduced tuition without really understanding how student costs break down and just like taking an aggressive stance for the college, we think is a strategy that's destined to fail. So the things that we're working on, although they're little, like green pint, or menstrual health, or menstrual health products, like a little goes a long way, and they add up, so we can gradually push towards larger change.
Thank you. The next question is going to be directed towards Jennifer and Maggie, but more specifically towards Jennifer. During your time as a senator in student assembly, you worked on the Committee on Mental Health, and according to your campaign website, worked with campus organizations to make mental health resources, meditations, and support more available to students. Some students have raised concerns that the work you did there and the funds that Student Assembly allocated towards these projects were insufficient in combating the severity of mental health issues facing Dartmouth students. How would you respond to these concerns?
So in terms of like my work on Student Assembly for mental health, it's something that I'm really passionate about, and why I've like been a part of Student Assembly for 3 years and working on these issues. We've been working a lot, especially with the Student Wellness Center, to really figure out what are ways that we can kind of incorporate more wellness practices into daily life. We're piloting a program now that's going to provide like free access to like premium calm like meditation apps for students to talk about. And then on the budget allocation front, the budget is like a really complicated process for Student Assembly, and we're really just like trying to do as much as we can to get the money. Like, we're not guaranteed it because a lot of it comes from like the student activities fee, and then just like the whole process is really complicated. So it's hard for us to we have to pitch to the undergraduate finance committee, so it's like complicated to assess and even obtain numbers. So in terms of that, like, we really are doing the best we can to make sure we allocate as much money as we can to mental health. And like Student Assembly doesn't have like infinite power and money. Like, we can't really go in and say we're going to put like so much money into one specific thing. And for that, we need to push the college more in terms of like allocating budgets to bigger projects, such as like a Dick's House overhaul.
I think just if I can just quickly touch on what Jennifer was saying, I think that we understand that mental health is different for everybody, right? We understand that there are people that are really need like medical attention, that really need sort of those resources, but we also understand that there are some people that are dealing with the daily stressors of life and that a meditation app can go a long way for those people. And we do recognize that there's like a difference there, and we don't pretend that student wellness or meditation apps are going to magically solve the mental health crisis at Dartmouth. We do think that they're important resources. We're proud of what we've achieved on that front, and we're happy that Student Assembly, specifically with our own budget, can do that. And then in addition to that, we will press the college as hard as possible to improve Dick's House. And in the interim, when we can't improve Dick's House, we will press them to improve funding and transportation to local therapists, and ensure that like insurance covers local therapists, all those things, because we recognize that the mental health crisis at Dartmouth is really, really, really large. And we know that the work we've done hasn't fixed it, and we will continue to fight tooth and nail to try and do better.
Is there additional time or?
There is not. You filled it exactly. Tana Munoz, would you like to respond?
Yeah, we want to emphasize that these initiatives, they have taken a lot of time, they've taken a lot of thought, and we do think that these are great steps forward. As we mentioned before, however, we do want to reiterate that for us, any sort of suggestion for moving forward, whether it's small, whether it's big, has to be accompanied by some sort of commentary on the leave of absence policy. As long as students are essentially penalized for seeking help, as long as students are penalized for being honest and saying, I am suffering, I don't feel safe, I really need help, as long as that will, result in potentially forced hospitalization, for being forced on medical leave, we can offer as much help as we want, but we need to also offer compassion and accountability for the institution and the harm that they've been doing by disincentivizing people. And I'm going to let Sebastian finish.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to a comment that was just made. Actually, we know that Student Assembly does not have infinite budgets, because we now know exactly how significant their budgets are. It was just revealed to us recently, and we wish this was said on the website as well. We just believe that the best wellness practice moving forward is investing significantly in student mental health services, making material change for the mental health hotline, and just kind of choosing a direction that really does serve student needs, and just actually allow students to get timely access to mental health services just in general.
Thank you. The next question is going to be directed to the Con Munoz campaign. According to your social media, your campaign was put on suspension for sharing misinformation about the Student Assembly budget. Current Student Assembly leadership has said that you shared inaccurate figures regarding the budget without looking at the budget information itself, which is available upon request, and without reaching out to them for clarity and accuracy. Would you like to clarify the reason your campaign was suspended, and what do you have to say to voters who may be confused?
Yeah, we're more than happy to talk about this. So we want to make clear that we messed up. That's just objectively what happened. We made a mistake here, and we deeply apologize for that mistake. This mistake was made following the Student Assembly posting their budget publicly in an Instagram infographic. We looked over this post. We consulted a handful of other people who had either previously been on UFC, people who had been involved in Student Assembly. We discussed with them to see if we were interpreting the number correctly, and a fair number of people believed that we were. So we think that this was just a misinterpretation, and once again points to kind of why we think it would be great if in the future these budgets in their entirety were, for example, available on the Student Assembly website at all times for more easy access. But yeah, we made a mistake, and we do deeply apologize for that mistake. We were attempting to share this information in good faith, based on the information that was publicly available to us at the time. We should have done our due diligence, and moving forward, we have been in conversation over the last day or two with Student Assembly and the UFC, attempting to ensure that this doesn't happen again, and working towards being transparent about the fact that we made a mistake, as well as what we're going to do in the future to prevent this from happening again. So we do deeply apologize to anybody who felt hurt by that. But moving forward, we're going to try our best. We're going to try to make sure that we have all information available, and we hope that in the future, this information can just be available in its entirety, in a place that's easy to access in a way that all students would be able to access.
Thank you both so much. Jennifer and Maggie, would you like to respond?
Yeah, we can respond briefly. We don't really know the full details of your campaign suspension, nor is it really our business, but I think just generally the confusion over the essay budget, I think that once again points to where experience is valued and where experience is important. Jennifer and I were very aware of the essay budget and understand how it works. We've heard about it at meetings in the past. We've approved budget decisions. So I think just generally like this is where essay experience comes in. And also the second, like sort of another really important part of our campaign where listening comes in. I think had a similar sort of situation cropped up, Jennifer and I would have attempted to reach out to the organization in question first and attempted to ask questions ahead of time and to really try and understand it that way and to make sure we weren't misrepresenting anything before going forward. But we appreciate sort of the candor and the response on the other campaign side.
Sebastian, do you have something to, were you raising your hand? You're muted.
Do we still have maybe 30 seconds I can use to respond as well? Or are we next question?
I'm feeling generous. I'll give you each an extra 30 seconds for the day.
Okay.
Just give
Okay.
the issue.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to also reiterate that yes, we are outsiders, and because of this, we used all public information and we made an honest mistake. We did make an honest mistake, and we do apologize for that. The information that we looked at that led us to the conclusion was in the budget Instagram post. It states that Student Assembly returned $24,003.99 to the Undergraduate Finance Committee because of COVID. So basically, we were unsure what because of COVID meant. So we believed initially that because of COVID meant because there was not in-person events, and so there was no there were no current ideas of what to do with the budget, and it was just returned. However, it was clarified by us later, and it was just, and I think the main issue was that the wording and the analysis of the budget posted on Instagram was quite unclear, and so we do apologize for our mistake, though.
Jennifer and Maggie, if you want to use your 30 seconds now, you can, or you could wait until later in the debate.
I think we've responded as much as we're going to.
Sounds good. The next question is directed towards your campaign. The Khan and Munoz campaign have made transparency a key part of their platform, proposing initiatives like fireside chats and the radio to share with students what Student Assembly is working on. Do you personally feel that transparency has been a problem in Student Assembly in the past? And how do you intend to keep students informed?
Is that to our campaign first?
That's to you.
Yeah, so that's like a key part of our campaign. Like Student Assembly is built around elevating student voices, and our platform talks about how we will host office hours and often have college administrators come in as guests so we can understand, so we can make them more accessible to the students. Because sitting down together, that's like a way that we can communicate and really listen to each other to move forward. In addition, we talked about sending out surveys and weekly newsletters to update students on what's going on, what Student Assembly is working on, and making sure that our priorities align. So we'll send out a survey in the beginning to understand what are the issues that people care the most about, and then at the end of the term to kind of follow up on that. So we're really focused on increasing transparency and really standing for students in talking with the administration. I don't know if Maggie, you want to add to that?
Yeah. I also just want to be super brutally honest about transparency. Transparency is twofold, and part of that is being open about what Student Assembly can and can't do. Jennifer and I aren't going to go in and make empty promises. We're not going to tell you that we can do something that we have no ability to do. And I think that that's a key component of transparency, is to be really like upfront and clear right now about what we're capable of. I also think that Kate and Jonathan could have done better communicating with the student body as a whole. I think that they had excellent communication within SA, that they had excellent communication with the administration, and that they achieved a lot of progress that they're not getting sort of credit for, or getting like sort of any sort of recognition for, because they really lacked sort of this communication with the student body as a whole, and there wasn't necessarily enough open lines of communication, which is why we're setting up this survey, why we're hosting weekly office hours. We're going to send out a weekly newsletter. We're going to have an open sort of form on our platform where you can, or on our website where you can ask us anything. Like transparency is key to us.
Thank you both. Atiya and Sebastian, would you like to respond?
Yeah, we just believe a different vision for what Student Assembly could be is an unrealistic vision. We recognize there's limitations on Student Assembly spending, and we've studied them closely. But we have a vision for Student Assembly that actually fills in the gaps that administration does not meet with its budget initiatives, with things like the food pantry, working towards actually pushing administration towards significant change. And we believe that if we can accomplish this much outside of student assembly, with budget transparency, with encouraging a student liaison, which is not just communications, but actually we're pushing for a student on the board of trustees as a voting member. And if we can accomplish just this much outside of student assembly, I just imagine how much we can accomplish inside student assembly for transparency. Just imagine us publishing budgets publicly on our website, making them easily accessible, not upon request, and actually just encouraging a more healthy culture when it comes to requesting information for what student assembly does, always being updated on what it does very easily, and also letting people sit in on our meetings and making sure that they're not closed door. So we just would love to move towards transparency, and we have really concrete initiatives to work towards that, including our plan to do a radio show, including our plan to publish the budget, and including our plan to allow people to sit in our meetings. And yeah, we definitely do believe we have very realistic progress towards that. And just having a different vision does not mean ours is unrealistic. It just means ours is more ambitious.
Can I use our response on that?
Go for it.
Yeah, so Maggie and I really stand by like the fact that we've been on student assembly for 3 years, that we have like a very realistic way of like looking at what are the things that are within the scope of power of SA. Like student assembly is a COSA organization. We're not institutionally given power. So our strength comes from pooling collective voices, taking like a strong approach and like still advocating for students, but understanding that like you can't go in and say to the administration, we demand this, and this is like something that needs to happen. Like that is not the way forward to change. Like we will work on that in the long term, but we have to be strategic about it in terms of communicating with them, showing them that we're willing to work with them. Like for the board thing, like we are working with various organizations like Tuck, like Geisel, and getting student representatives from there so that we can come together and talk to the higher position, be like, hey, we need student representation on the board, and this is how we get there. Like we can't just go in and say we need 3 voting members. Like that's not like a position that student assembly really has the power to do so. So like I really admire the conviction and then like the ambition, but we're taking like a realistic stance, kind of understanding that we need to listen and we need to work together with organizations. I don't know if Maggie, you want to add?
You are actually out of time, but thank you very much. The next set of questions have been sourced from the public. Many of them have been edited for clarity. The first one is going to be directed toward the Con Munoz campaign. In your April 11th Con Munoz Student Assembly platform email, your very first platform point read reducing tuition to reflect student realities. You went on to say that Dartmouth's $70,000 tuition was too high, noting the overcharging of students is unacceptable. How do you intend to go about lowering tuition, as this is something that seems outside of Student Assembly's purview?
Yeah, so we believe, so student assembly meets with administration often, and we believe that in meetings with administration, we can bring the facts and figures on the budget directly to them. We have the power to, bring budget numbers to them. Say, look how much you're charging. Look how much people are making. Look how ridiculous this overcharging is. And let's say our pressure is not enough. We can consistently push using the facts and the numbers. It's just a fact that many people can't afford $70,000 per year. Many of us are on financial aid, and those who are on financial aid are still struggling. So we just believe that considering the fact that even emergency funds are not fully provided by Dartmouth administration as it stands, requiring $70,000 of us in paying for Zoom classes is something that we can advocate against. So we just believe that definitely, at least we can bring the case to administration that reducing tuition is the right path forward. Even if we don't have the institutional power to change tuition, we can still present a case to them, and that's our path forward. And I'd like to pass to Atia.
Yeah, so I think on this note, additionally, like, while we say, oh, it's not possible, it can't happen here, there are other institutions that have George Washington University, Georgetown University, Lafayette College, National University. All of these universities have had tuition discounts at some point over this past year or during this past spring semester. So one, I think it is possible. And I think that additionally, like, this pandemic is an extremely rare and extremely special circumstance. And I think that calls for a unique willingness to address the urgent needs that are faced by students. I think this is something that requires people thinking on their feet. It's not expected. It's not really something that falls under the usual jurisdiction of anything that any organization really knows how to deal with. This is a once in a lifetime event. But I think that means that we need to have bold once in a lifetime solutions and that we're willing to have those conversations.
Jennifer and Maggie, would you like to take a minute to respond?
Yeah, that'd be great. I think we just want to start off by saying, like, the tuition is set by the Board of Trustees and long-term financial planners and falls just so far beyond the scope of what Student Assembly really can do that we think it's really, unfortunately, kind of an empty promise. And while we agree that tuition shouldn't be as high as it is, I think that there's really no path forward for Student Assembly to pursue that tuition reduction. So I think that our hope is actually that we're going to be able to increase financial resources for students that are on financial aid. We're going to focus on that side of it because we want to make sure that Dartmouth is affordable for everybody. And so that doesn't necessarily mean reducing tuition overall. To us, that means bumping up financial aid for students, or addressing the financial aid crisis, addressing resources across the board for students that need that assistance. And one of our main platform points is increasing access to resources, and financial is such a big component of that. Also, just a fact check, GW raised their tuition this year, not lowered it. So I think that Dartmouth was sort of in line with the national trends. Jennifer, if you want to hop in.
Yeah, just that we take the time to kind of, well, at least for me, I've taken the time to sit down with financial aid counselors, understand how the costs for individual students break down. And if we want to make change in terms of lowering tuition, we need to first have a good understanding of what that would look like and how can we actually do that instead of just going in and saying we need to cut it. And then because that's a hard conversation to have, we're working on that, except while simultaneously working on other ways that we can help provide financial aid through our initiatives, such as the coach voucher program or the co-op program or the menstrual product project. So we still want to work towards change, but right now we're just taking the actual concrete steps instead of just saying, this is something that needs to happen, you guys figure it out, because we're demanding it as students.
Thank you all. The next question is directed towards Jennifer and Maggie. The Con Munoz campaign addresses the needs of students with disabilities by citing the lack of physical accommodations in certain on-campus buildings and the need for construction projects to fix it. How do you intend to support the needs of disabled students?
I can start. So Maggie and I definitely also really want to, one of our core initiatives is fostering inclusive campus culture, and that includes disabled students and students with disabilities. During our campaign, we've reached out to student accessibility services as well as Access Dartmouth, and we were the first campaign to do alt text throughout from our first post in the get-go. So we really want to be able to help provide resources for these communities and work together and communicate and listen. I don't know if Maggie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think just generally increasing access to resources and support is a huge platform point for us. Like Jennifer said, we reached out to the Student Accessibility Office. Our presidency will continue to be in constant communication with them. I think we'd be really interested in pursuing the more physical sort of accessibility initiatives as well. We that's a great point on your campaign's behalf, and I think that we would be really interested in sort of communicating with you going forward and communicating with the Student Accessibility's office and looking into that lawsuit deeper to make sure that Dartmouth is in compliance with all of those. We really strongly believe that Dartmouth needs to be as inclusive as possible, and throughout we have said we're always willing to listen, and we're always willing to be told when we're missing something or when we didn't cover something fully. And so going forward, we will make sure to incorporate that into our platform.
Thank you both. Con Munoz, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think my interest in this issue starts even before I came to campus. And I think or when I first came to campus in 2019, a lawsuit was being raised against Dartmouth for not meeting its basic requirements under Americans with Disabilities Act. And as someone with a mother who is deeply invested in disabilities activism, my mother's a special education teacher, as someone who sprained my leg my first week into campus and had to figure out that many buildings on campus don't have elevators. Many buildings on campus actually even going up the stairs can be a struggle for anybody with mobility impairments, either permanent or temporary. And the fact is that many times administration treats accessibility as a privilege rather than a right. And so they find areas where they can just get through the basic requirements. They find areas where they can squeeze through. They can find areas where they can reduce the problem or the problems that they present to many students with disabilities. And so the fact is we definitely need to actively advocate for them, work with groups like Access Dartmouth, and make this issue clear so that new construction is authorized, and that so we can actually move past this and move towards accessibility where all students can feel welcome on campus.
Thank you. All right, the next question is also directed at the Con Munoz campaign. Neither of you have held a position on student assembly. Why are you best equipped to lead student assembly, and what do you feel has prepared you for the realities of this role?
Yeah, I think I can begin to answer this. So as Sebastian has mentioned, we are outsiders. And I think this has given us two kind of unique viewpoints. One, because we have not been in student assembly, we're incredibly aware of how kind of difficult it has been as people who are not intimately aware of the knowledge and the conversations that are being had to access this information. Yes, you can request things, but they're not openly available. And we're left to try to figure out how things work based on insufficient information that's available. Additionally, just because we haven't had experience in student assembly doesn't mean that we don't have experience as students, and as students who, with different compounding identities that reinforce one another across different student groups. We've been able to have conversations and intimate experiences in other leadership roles, whether it's in the ISC or in my sorority. So leadership in general is not something that is rare for us, but this particular type of leadership, we're willing to learn, we're willing to do what we have to do to make it more accessible.
Thank you. Our final question is directed towards Jennifer and Maggie.
Wait, sorry, do we get a chance to respond to that one or no?
Oh yeah, you can respond.
Sorry to interrupt there. I think just generally, I think experience goes a really long way when it comes to student assembly. I think that it's a really challenging role to take on, and it's one that requires a lot of communication with a lot of different groups. It requires a lot, like building a relationship with the current senators. It requires all of that. And I think that Jennifer and I do have that explicit experience. I also think we have demonstrated interest. Like, we've really been invested in these projects since freshman year. We understand them, we're passionate about them. We started some of them and we really want to see them through. And this isn't something that we're doing just on the spur of the moment. It's not something we're looking to do sort of suddenly, or that we weren't considering for a long time, or that we're doing for any reason other than that we're deeply passionate about improving Dartmouth for everyone. And I think that's been reflected in the last 3 years of hard work and countless hours that we've spent. And honestly, for me, like the Dartmouth Coach Voucher Program, for example, seeing how many people that's helped, it's like inspiring me to keep going every day and to keep fighting for students. So I think experience goes a long way. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just say like the job of like student assembly president, isn't something you can like really learn on the job. You need to kind of know how student assembly works, like the scope of power that student assembly have, and being willing to like collaborate instead of just like go in and like make these big demands. Our platform is based on like results from the economic inequality survey, and we're really looking to just listen and collaborate.
Thank you. The last question on a very similar note is for Jennifer and Maggie. How has your experience on student assembly informed changes you believe should be made to the organization?
I can start really quick. So yeah, I think experience that Maggie and I have had is really important. We're really proud of all the things that we've done. And we also notice that there are many things that we still need to move forward on. But having experience allows us to know what student assembly can realistically do and where we can apply pressure on the college to stand and advocate for students. We know that like student assembly, for example, can't give out money directly to students, but instead of just going, oh, like we need to do that, we take the steps to convince the college that this is something that's needed. That's why we have these programs such as the Coach Voucher Program or the Co-op Voucher Program. Like student assembly money can't be used to pay for therapy, but that's why like we go in and we advocate for additional ways that we can work around that and push for it ultimately to change. Like our meetings are open and we are always just looking to really listen and collaborate. And I think that our 3 years of experience have kind of proven how dedicated we are. I don't know if Maggie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think just generally, so much of student assembly's work happens behind closed doors. I would say about 90% of the things, especially that this past administration have happened sort of like kind of behind closed doors. They put in like 20 hours a week without any sort of recognition. And I think that it's just generally, I think for us, it's like about sort of finding a better balance between the closed doors and open communication. I think we're willing to put in just as much time and just as much effort, but we also want to make sure that students know what's going on and that students know that we're fighting for them every single day, and that we don't necessarily just sort of forget or wake up one day and like forget that we're on student assembly, right? Every single day we want to be vocal. Every single week we want to be releasing these newsletters. Like for example, student assembly helped with the hiring of 4 new counselors of color last year, and I don't think they pushed Dick's House very heavily on that, and we're able to get that through, and that's just absolutely incredible. But I think just generally making sure the student body knows that that's going on and sort of informing them of the actions is so crucial to student assembly. So I think that's where I'd like to see it change going forward.
Deanne, Sebastian, would you like to respond?
Yeah, we really do respect the level of work and commitment it's taken to try to make the changes that we've seen. I think something that has stuck out to us is, like we've said, this pandemic is not something anyone could have planned for or expected. There's no plans, there's no policies, there's nothing written into the handbooks about how to deal with something like this. And we think that while it is important to be, quote unquote realistic, we also think that a little bit of imagination is required to adapt to student needs. Student needs right now are urgent, they're big. That's just the reality of the situation. And while we think that perhaps there may be pushback for the things that we want, we don't think that that means that students have any less of a right to the things that we're demanding. And we're concerned that the old way of doing things might not bring the change that students desperately require right now to feel safe and supported on this campus. I'll let Sebastian finish.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we do respect the many hours that student assembly members put in, but it's about the efficiency of work and it's about delivering results for people. We're both policymakers and we're both advocates, and we're committed to delivering material change through creative strategies, considering our immediate circumstances, considering the limitations of student assembly, but working to expand the role of student assembly to make it something that truly represents students. So we're committed to understanding as much as possible. And once we get into this role, we will understand as much as possible, but we will not be restricted by our understanding. We will always be pushing for student assembly to be doing more. We will always be pushing the role of student assembly and advocating for students, and just kind of not having to stay inside the box.
Thank you all so much for your time and responses. Sadly, we are almost done with our time together, and it's time to move on to closing remarks. So we'll go ahead and start with you, Jennifer. Each of you are going to get 1 minute.
Yeah, I guess to close, I would just say that Maggie and I, we think that our ticket is the best to address all of these issues at Dartmouth. Like as Atia said, like the pandemic has been really tough, and we understand that student needs are big and they need to be addressed. And we do have the ambition, but just our approach is going to be the most efficient way. We share a lot of the frustrations that many students face, and it's easy to kind of point out what students like the obstacles and criticize. But we really want to take that ambition and frustration and direct it somewhere productive. Because Maggie and I have experience, we've spent countless hours of conversations. Like just this week, we've met with various organizations for student accessibility to the Office of Student Life. We've chatted with the Student Wellness Center and the International Students Association, to the Schoolhouse Anti-Racism Coalition, to Sunrise Dartmouth, and just many more places on campus. So like our policies are based on an accurate and comprehensive understanding of college policies, such as financial limitations and just students' assembly power. We want to be realistic with what we can do and really follow through on everything. So elevating student voices, providing access to resources and support, working toward an inclusive campus through listening and collaboration. That's the only way to make realistic change, especially with this time that's really crucial of reopening.
Maggie?
Yeah, I want to take this time to thank everyone who's sort of come, who's had questions, who's provided support, who's offered sort of any sort of insights this past week and before. We're so grateful for all of that support, all that help. We really value and appreciate all of your ideas, and we promise that our administration will do everything in our power to incorporate those into our plans, to fight for you and alongside you, and like to continue. We are ambitious, we are efficient, and we are immediate in our plans. The sort of Jennifer and I, like if we are in presidency, you'll see these implemented immediately and quickly and across organizations, right? Our platform does not rely on always going immediately to the top. We do not need Hanlon's approval to get all of these things through. We can work with different levels of administration across the board, and you will see change instantaneously in our administration. And we're very passionate about that. And we know that Dartmouth students can't afford to wait right now. Dartmouth students can't afford to take sort of a radical approach that might achieve nothing. You need change and you need it now. And we think that we are the best ticket to do that. So for those reasons, we really hope that we've earned your vote and that on Monday, you'll vote JQ and MJ.
Thank you. Atia?
So I think what we would like to say in our remarks is we want to work for the students. We care deeply about working with other members of student assembly. We care deeply about working with all levels of administration, but ultimately we work for the students. And the students are universally frustrated with the inaction of this past year by administration on key issues. We've proven effective at causing a shift in practices, even from our position as outsiders, through our experience in various student groups, through student advocacy, through our experiences and relationships that we've had on the ground. We really want to emphasize that if elected, we want to be able to get student demands across urgently and actively, and we would like to engage with administrators and others with a civil and resolute sternness. We don't necessarily want to go in guns blazing, but we do want to go in being firm as to what our intentions are. And we believe that what is reasonable is whatever students require to have a safe and healthy quality of life on this campus, and that will require, at the moment, big, bold changes. We think the question is not necessarily why are we frustrated by inaction. The question is, how can you not be? We've looked at the example that other student assemblies have set. We mentioned Cornell already, and I don't think that we gain anything as students by having your representatives do less for you and only tell you what they can't do. I don't know what more a lot of students have to lose, and so I encourage you, if you want to see dramatic, bold change that is within the realm of what is possible, but is also imaginative, that you should vote for Con Munoz on Monday. And I want to thank everybody also for coming and being a part of this today.
Sebastian?
Thank you so much. I think after a year of possibly lacking full weight behind what's asked, we've seen the closure of the Paddock Music Library, the Kresge Science Library, cuts to Dartmouth swim and dive, golf, lightweight rowing, and varsity teams, cuts to 50% of FSPs, LSAs, and other study abroad programs, and countless steps in the wrong direction on the part of administration. But students have long been pushing for administrators to hear them. There's student activists in Access Dartmouth, in SAPA, and countless organizations across campus that recognize the ways that administration can do better and improve to be the best college it can possibly be. With the full support of their student leaders, we believe Dartmouth can and will do better under the Con Munoz presidency and vice presidency. Thank you so much.
Well, thank all of you. And I do just want to first off by thanking you all so much again for joining us. This has been a great experience and I've loved hearing all of your responses. I know our audience members have too. I want to give a brief reminder that voting will last from tomorrow, Monday, April 9th at 5 p.m. Eastern to April 20th at 5 p.m. Eastern. The debate will be available to watch as a recording here on Facebook, as well as on our YouTube channel in case you missed it or you want to revisit it. Thank you so much to our audience members as well for joining us, and have a good rest of the day.